and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by Matt Freeman, coming to you live from inside your TV. Matt, don't go towards the light. Or do? I don't know. One of them.
All I know is that this house is clean.
Wrong. Wrong.
Oh, dear.
This week on the show, it is time once again, Matt, for the Doof Canon. We took a little break from this series as we were watching all these Oscar films, but that's over and we're back. So, Matt, explain to the people at home what this show format is.
Well, now that we're back on track, once a month, those individuals that donate to us on Patreon at the Council of Doof level will get a chance to collectively decide on a movie for the community to consider for entrance into the Doof Canon. Scott and I, and maybe some guests, will meet, talk about the movie, and then present our case for why it should or should not be admitted.
But as always, we leave the final decision up to you, so stick around, listen to our arguments and what we think about the film, and then find a link in the show notes to cast your vote. Matt, what has our council brought for us today?
This month, our council has nominated the 1982 horror film Poltergeist.
The house looks just like the one next to it. And the one next to that. And the one next to that. A young couple live in it.
Give Ken a kiss.
You are so obnoxious.
With their 3 children.
Poor Ken. Honey, Chewy tried 10 times.
And something more.
They're here.
All right, Matt, tell me what Poltergeist is all about.
A family's home is haunted by a host of demonic ghosts.
Well, short and sweet.
More or less accurate.
This movie was written by Steven Spielberg, Michael Grace, and Mark Victor. It is directed by Tobe Hooper, and it stars Craig T. Nelson, Jo Beth Williams, and little Heather O'Rourke as Carol Ann Freeling. One of the saddest stories ever. I don't know if you know anything about Heather O'Rourke, Matt, but she dies 6 years after filming this movie. So
Yeah, I think I did, and then I sort of erased it from my mind because it's so depressing.
Mm-hmm. All right, Matt. Had you seen Poltergeist before, and what did you think about it on this rewatch?
Yes, I had seen it before when I was a kid. Can't even estimate what age I was. It's funny. I kind of thought of it as like this timeless classic 80s film. And rewatching it, it was one of those experiences where you're almost like, did I watch this? Because and I know that I did, because like so many of the scenes are actually quite memorable and iconic, really. But at the same time, it felt like a totally different movie. I mean, so much of it went over my head when I was a kid. Like the themes, like what the movie is actually doing and what the movie is talking about, went over my head. It was just kind of a scary ghost story to me. The funny thing is, it was almost not scary to me as an adult. I think that's just, hey, that happens, right? It's not necessarily a knock against the movie. I think the final opening comment is that the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror spoof of this movie basically says everything that I want to say about the movie. So you can just go watch that.
It's been too long since I've seen that one. I don't have any specific recollection of anything that says, so I don't know if I agree with that or not.
I'll just say that it ends with them refusing to leave the house and saying we're just going to have to get along together, and then they go outside on the front lawn, and the house goes an eternity with the Simpsons, and then it implodes, destroying itself.
I remember that now. No, that's perfect. Yeah, I think I'm with you on this one. I had definitely seen this movie many, many times, I'm pretty sure. But I don't think I've ever watched it really, thinking about what it is and what it's doing. And so this was a really interesting watch for me, where I'm like, oh, this movie's like saying things about things. I didn't know that. I thought it was just a spooky ghost story movie. But no, this movie does have quite a bit to say, and it is also incredibly 80s in all the best and worst ways. It's I enjoyed this rewatch. I did overall, and I'm looking forward to this conversation, actually getting to think about this movie that I've never really thought about before.
Yeah, so it'd be fun to kind of start in on what we think it is saying, because I I was I was taken off guard by I mean so let's I don't even know where to start, right? Like we've got all these we got it, basically at a very high level, at the risk of oversimplifying, like it's a movie about America, and it's a
Yeah.
movie
Uh-huh.
about hypocrisy and and sort of fakery, basically, and how much we overemphasize the appearances of things while there is something something wrong under the surface.
Mhm.
I think that's a theme, or those that vibe permeates everything to a degree that I certainly never caught before.
Yeah, I mean, it is certainly jarring, and when the film opens on the national anthem,
Uh huh.
which is something like I knew for the kids out there listening. TVs used to do this thing where they would stop broadcasting a signal at some point at night, and they would sign off with the national anthem, and then just there would be no more signal. That's a thing that it's just ridiculous to think about now, but that was the way it worked. And so that's what this episode, or sorry, this movie opens up with, is the final, you know, national anthem right before the TV's about to shut off. And yeah, I was like, oh, oh, immediately, okay. And then of course I think a lot of what you're saying ties into the idea that this is a film definitely talking about television quite a bit too. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the television thing is part and parcel with everything else, where it's
yeah.
like this is the method by which we hypnotize ourselves and tell
Mhm.
ourselves this story and put this facade over everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I totally agree with you here because this is essentially what we have here is a neighborhood that is built over that is built over a graveyard. Like this is, I think one of the things the guy says in the line he says is like, don't worry about it. At least we weren't built over an Indian burial ground or something. Um, which is like, oh, okay, well, at least not that. But yeah, we just pretended to move graves and didn't actually move graves and didn't actually move the bodies, which is the whole thing. You said like we moved the headstones, but not the bodies underneath, like the facade that we put over things, the
yeah,
illusion that we make over
right.
all these things.
And then on top of that, just the consistent importance of keeping up appearances while you've got this insanely supernatural thing happening in your life.
Yeah.
Um,
It isn't, this is such a weird movie, and it's for that exact reason. Like, first of all, I think one thing I'm always surprised about with this movie is how early in the movie Carol Ann gets taken. Like
mhm,
I always in my head when I think about this movie, think that's like a second to third act transition moment, and then the third act is okay, let's get Carol Ann back. But no, it's like end of first act
yeah,
transition is Carol Ann, and like the movie does this very abrupt cut to days have presumably gone by, and now they're inviting these people into their house, and we're just seeing how they're living with the reality of their new existence, which is there's just a room upstairs where furniture is constantly spinning and their daughter's just talking to them, and like, yeah, the weirdness of like taking them on a tour through their house while all these insane things are happening, and you're just like, what is going on? This
yeah.
is so weird.
The funny thing, so there's so many things about it that are actually just funny
Hmm.
that I didn't see as being funny when I was a kid. It's either because I just didn't have a sense of like what makes sense versus what is ridiculous. I think
Yeah.
that's probably what it was, honestly. But like one thing that struck me as very funny, and I'm pretty sure like intentionally funny, like this was a joke, is that like you've got they bring in the scientists, and I mean, there's basically like a setup punchline where one of the scientists is like, "Yes, I once recorded a toy car roll across the floor slowly," and Craig Nelson is like, "Uh huh," and then he shows him like the most over the top, like comically over the top demonstration of paranormal activity you've ever seen in
Yeah.
any movie, basically. Still,
Yeah, he
like,
said it was like it moved a meter over the
yeah,
course of 12 hours or something,
yeah,
and it's like,
yeah,
of course, you couldn't detect it by the naked eye, but,
yeah, yeah, and
yeah, and yeah.
but so then like we go from there, okay, and the the thing is after that it continues to be funny because the scientists are like these electromagnetic readings are really suggesting a high degree of you know, and you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, you can see with your naked eyes that impossible things are happening all around you. Like,
Yeah.
put down, like, it's like they keep referring to like the instrumentation, and they're like taking these readings, and it's like, well, this is crazy. Like
Yeah.
you're seeing the most incredible thing that anyone has ever seen, and you're like, what are you going to do with that recording later? Like, and like, to me, I don't know if this is intended to be funny, but to me that was like one of the actually funniest parts of the whole movie is this idea. And I don't exactly know what it's making fun of, but if we continue this idea of like, this is about America, it's like we see things we can't explain, and our culture just like is like, huh, how can we measure that? Can we simplify that? How can we
Yeah.
how can we pitch that? And it's like they have certain conversations where they're like, they're very interesting conversations in that they make no sense as conversations that people would actually be having, and they make way more sense as like a sort of metaphorical conversation for like
Yeah.
how weird we are in the way that we talk about things in our culture.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I think there's a lot about, how we gloss over things, how we try to explain things away.
Mhm.
Um, I really liked the there's so many great early scenes in this in this movie that are kind of ridiculous. We meet one of Craig T. Nelson's friends when he's riding a bicycle over with a bunch of beer,
Mhm.
and he's like rushing to get to the TV, which again is more TV commentary. But a kid like crashes his bike with a remote car and he spills all the beer, and he runs into the house still with the cans of beer, runs in front of the TV. The beer is spraying everywhere, like shooting out in these massive streams, and he just like plops down in front of the TV with all this beer spraying everywhere, and like nobody's doing anything about it, and it's so weird. And that's like the same thing I feel like happens again and again. The burial ground is the biggest example, but like the ways in which there's so many examples I'm struggling to grab for one right now, but like there's just moment after moment where characters experience something and then try to either explain it away. Oh, the other one I was thinking of as a perfect example of this is the two parents put their kids to bed. Then we cut to them in the bedroom. They're both smoking pot, and Craig T. Nelson, while smoking, is reading a book about Ronald Reagan,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
which is the most hilarious contrast. Like the war on drugs president, like he's reading a book about him while doing drugs.
Yeah.
Which is it's perfect. It's perfect. But that's like this movie's laced with all this stuff of
Yeah.
just like absurdity and ridiculousness that is not. It's not dealt with. It's not handled. Like a lot of it comes off as funny jokes, but like even the two neighbors with the TV remotes that change each other's channels, it's like, do something about this.
Yeah.
Like what are we doing?
Right. They're just arguing, and I mean, you could go all sorts of metaphorical with that. It's like you've got people arguing about reality in a sense, and instead of actually forming any kind of consensus or figuring out how to come to some agreement, they just bicker back and forth and just keep flipping it back and forth like children, right? They basically bicker the same way their children bicker. So while we're talking about like these absurdities, I mean, and I think to sort of mix in some element of this idea of like appearances and hypocrisy and everything. You pointed this out to me. I didn't notice it. So full credit to you. But like you said, when Craig T. Nelson is introducing the family to the investigators, he says, "This is my wife. She's 32. And my daughter, she's 16." And you're like, and I just, it just passed me right by, honestly. But it's like, hold on a second. 16 minus 32.
Let me do some quick math here. Wait a minute.
So his wife was 16 when they had their first child.
Uh-huh.
And he was older, right?
Yeah, well, we don't actually ever learn his age, so I guess there's room for
Well,
he was 16 too, and they just had an oops baby. But Craig T. Nelson was 38 when he filmed this
uh,
movie, so if he is his character's age, then he was 22, knocking up a 16-year
yeah.
old.
Well, he definitely looks. He looks older than 32. Like he
Yeah,
seems to be a guy who was cast to be kind of a middle-aged man, basically.
yeah,
Like
I
that.
agree. I agree.
Like that's just how he looks. And then sort of paired with this, almost in another comedy beat, is a gag that I caught that I just loved, where at the end of the movie the mom is telling the teenage daughter, like, all right, yeah, and we're getting out of this house, we're going to the Holiday Inn on I-95. And then the teenage daughter goes, oh yeah, I remember that place. And, and her mom goes, what, honey? And she goes, nothing. And it's like, once, I mean, I don't know exactly what we're doing with that, other than it just being kind of funny, but like it's this repeated beat of like appearances versus and propriety, and people sort of
Yeah.
like, not that like having a kid when you're young is like this terrible thing. That's not my point. It's
No,
just like
no.
the importance of appearances that we put up, but our hypocrisy, our ultimate hypocrisy around our, like, do as I say, not as I do type behavior. And
Yeah,
I
and
think
this
that's, yeah.
and this is something else I caught in this rewatch, and I will gladly just blame this on the 80s were a wild time, man, of it all. But there's a sequence very early in this movie where they're having a pool put in, so there's some construction workers, with an excavator, digging out the pool, and their 16-year-old daughter gets ready to go to school, hops on a bike, and all these grown men start immediately like ogling her and catcalling
Catcalling,
her.
yeah.
And she sees that and like flips him off, and we're like, yeah, good for you, fuck those guys. And then we cut to inside the house when her mother is watching this all happen, and then just kind of laughs it off.
Mhm.
And like it could very well just be, oh, this was the 80s, this is the type of thing where just like, oh, men, the silly men and their inappropriateness. But it could also be another part of what we're doing with this movie, which is
Yeah.
like this idea of, that is incredibly inappropriate, but we're not going to do anything about it. Like,
Yeah.
we're just going to kind of let that happen, and just laugh it off and move on, because we don't want to deal with any of the implications of anything. We're just kind of
Right.
happy in our perfect suburban existence, and nothing bad. We don't want anything bad to around here.
Yeah, it's funny because you and I weren't actually quite alive yet in 1983, but
Mhm.
my understanding is that even at the time it would have been seen as, inappropriate to catcall a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
And so that's like, that strikes me as something that the movie is doing. I mean the repeated element of the mom was 16 when she gave
Yeah.
birth,
Yeah.
not just
Uh-huh.
and now their 16-year-old daughter is being like heavily sexualized, and it's
Yeah.
like this, it's a very, very much a background element, but I think it all plays into the same pattern of
Yeah.
hidden you know hidden things. I wish I'm not quite, I don't feel like I'm quite hitting the mark of what is the thesis. It's like,
Mhm.
I feel like I'm gesturing broadly at the idea of like, I don't know, like it seems like all art coming out of the 80s was like, America's not actually that great.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you realize that America's not actually that awesome,
Yeah.
guys? Um,
I mean, perhaps the way perhaps we're just overcomplicating it, and I think going back to the television of it all is a way to simplify it, right?
Mhm.
Because the one very clear image throughout this whole thing is the TV. It is the thing we start with,
Mhm.
and there is a TV in every room in this house, right? There's one downstairs. Craig T. Nelson is falling asleep in front of it at the beginning of the movie. There's one in their bedroom. They're constantly watching it. There's one in the kitchen. I think one of my favorite jokes in the movie is Carol Ann is watching the static in the kitchen, and the mom goes, Carol Ann, that's bad for you. You can't watch that. And she flicks it to a channel that has a war movie on it, and people getting shot and dying, and then just walks away. Like, this is not subtle shit, right? Like, very obvious. Like, we're really inspecting and examining our addiction to this thing and how it is ruling us, and in essence, kind of kidnapping our children. So I mean, I think everything you're saying is true, and this is supposed to, the TV in itself is just reflecting a larger overall message. But I just think maybe the TV portion of it is a way to kind of simplify that message down to just a couple sentences we can say and distill it perfectly. Is that, like, you know, TV is this escape. It is this thing that we can pour all of our focus and attention into, that allows us to avoid looking at the true badness that's all around us and underneath us.
I think you're right. And then, I mean, the TV takes their daughter from them metaphorically, and it's really only through their sort of, you know, love and humanity and family ties that they're able to overcome the beast.
I do think it's intentional that, you know, all the scientists that come with all their technical gizmos and gizmos and gadgets, gizmos and gadgets, are completely ineffectual towards stopping any of this stuff. And it's not until the psychic comes that they're able to actually do anything.
Yeah. That's interesting. The psychic is an interesting element. I just wanted to mention before we move on from this beat that the psychic calls their enemy, you know, it calls the evil spirit within the house the beast. And there's a famous Ray Bradbury quote, which I'm going to read to you in its entirety. The television, that insidious beast, that Medusa, which freezes 1 billion people to stone every night, staring fixedly, that siren which called and sang and promised so much and gave after all so little. So I don't feel like it's a stretch to say that the calling it the beast is a reference to this quite famous Ray Bradbury quote. I've heard that there's actually a web serial that I really like called That Insidious Beast, and it's named after this quote. But it's the evil ghost in the house that is haunting them, that has taken their child from them, is the television. I think you're right.
It comes from the TV. It first talks to her via the TV. It comes from the TV. We see it shoot out into the wall, kind of jump from the TV into the house. And I mean, there's that wonderful image at the very end of the movie where they go into the hotel room and Craig T. Nelson just takes the TV and pushes it out and says, "No, we're done with this." I mean, again, not very subtle. You know, the TV is such a fixture, and of course the static screen is like the lasting image from this movie, right? Like the Carol Ann sitting in front of that static set.
It's poetic. I think I think that's what's funny is, like, it's kind of a silly movie, and it's easy to make fun of sitting from our position where we are now. Like, while I was watching it, I was, you know, in a good humored way, I was like, is this even a good movie? Like, I was actually just like confused, because I was like, again, I thought of this as like this great sort of classic, this like sort of seminal horror film in a way, and it's like, oh gosh, this is wacky. And then I kind of like clicked my brain over into like, wait a minute, it's not that it's wacky, it's that it's sort of doing this almost like magical realism absurdist thing where the characters are acting like idiots, but that's the point. It's like
everyone acts so stupid in this movie. I think you're right, that is the point. I mean, it is very easy to make fun of. There's so much absurdity and ridiculousness. Like, I laughed out loud when the one guy says, "I'm hungry, I'm gonna go get a snack," and goes into the kitchen and just pulls out a whole ass steak. Which is, I mean, that's a great sequence. Like, that's one of the most famous sequences from the movie, right? Where the steak is walking along the counter and then starts exploding, and then he realizes that the chicken leg he's been eating has been covered in maggots, runs into the bathroom, and then starts pulling his skin off his face. Oh, it's such a good sequence. But like, he just like opens the fridge and like pulls out just a whole ass steak. It's not wrapped in anything, and it's not his house. That's not his food.
Right. what's he gonna do? What's he gonna do with that steak?
He's gonna, it's presumably it's the middle of the night too, and he's
Right.
just gonna cook up a steak
Uh-huh.
at 2 a.m.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's absurd, it's comical.
Hmm.
I one thing I wanted to talk about, I think kind of set aside from everything else we've been talking about is, we kind of have this recurring conversation over on Kingslingers that really originated with Salem's Lot, which is a vampire story, and that book concerns itself somewhat with the idea of like, really, what would you do if you encountered something that was unquestionably supernatural?
Hmm.
Like, actually think through what would you do? Because basically, the way people behave in movies is never realistic. Like,
Hmm.
because the reality, and just to paraphrase our conclusion, like, there's really nothing that I could say to you that would convince you that I have a vampire in my basement, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I you would have to see something for yourself. And so, like, this movie, I think was sort of a fun take on that, where it's definitely less serious, but it is confronting this, or at least examining this idea of like, this family sees something clearly and unambiguously supernatural, and you sort of see a range of reactions to that. Um, where like the wife is just kind of excited by it and thinks it's fun. The husband is kind of scared of it but doesn't quite know what to do.
Hmm.
He actually sort of underreacts because he's just like, don't go near it, when in
Yeah.
reality my reaction would be like, have a total mental breakdown. um and then the scientists have their own sort of like scientist reaction to it. Psychics
Hmm.
have their own sort of psychic reaction to it. Like, I just thought it was interesting as an example of this sort of thing, where like how people react to something they can't explain.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I loved the the difference between Craig T. Nelson and Joe Beth Williams.
Mhm.
Their differing reactions to this whole thing. That is one fun thing that the movie does, is it kind of holds the turn to the evil for a little bit, where we get to
Mhm.
very briefly like do the, oh, this is neat, isn't this neat? Look, if you sit in this spot, you will move across the floor to this spot, and like from her perspective, the person, I think she's just a housewife. Like I don't think we're told anything else than that, and so she's kind of stuck home all day, and uses this and finds this as very entertaining and fun. Craig T. Nelson comes home and, as you pointed out, like immediately, like, no, this is crazy.
Mhm.
This is crazy. This is not normal. This is not good. And then of course everything turns rather quickly. But
Yeah.
really, I mean, it's their fault because they bought that creepy clown and kept it in a child's room.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's funny to me is, almost 100% of the memories of this movie that I have from my childhood viewing experience are the scenes where the children are being menaced by the supernatural
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Like,
The tree is very distinct and
yeah,
memorable to me. The clown also. I remember the
yeah,
swimming. I remember Carol Ann like holding onto the headboard and being sucked into the closet. I have a lot of distinct memories of that. And then the other one is the woman in the pool, with all the skeletons. So
yeah. I
that's
think I think I remembered all of those things, and I definitely, in terms of things I was actually scared by, I think the tree was the scariest to me. It's the idea of like the tree is eating him, something about the just grossness of like this slime that's all over him. Like, it's like the tree's saliva, basically. It's
Yeah, I mean,
gross.
it's going down, like, he's going down its mouth. Like,
Yeah, right.
it's the tree's literally about to eat him. And I
Yeah,
thought there was a weirdness in the edit there where we don't actually see how Craig T. Nelson gets him out of the mouth of the tree. Like, we cut away, and the next time he's like coming down with him in his arms, and we don't actually see that. But I was like, oh, is this kid? I don't remember this kid dying.
yeah,
But I don't know how he's going to get him out of there.
yeah. I think, by the way, like, probably for me, the emotional beat that actually landed the best was what was like the little boy who's just like terrorized, like, for the whole movie, and like there's various beats where like they try to talk to him about the supernatural and death, and he sort of has these very like kids say the darndest things type reactions to their
Mhm.
attempts to like basically bullshit him about like, oh, don't worry, death isn't scary. And he's like,
Mhm.
he's sort of having like the natural correct reaction of a smart kid being like, well, how do you know? You know. And
Yeah.
um and then by the end, like when the clown comes after him, he actually like fights
Yeah.
and like is brave. And this is something I didn't remember actually. And it's to say that he's brave is not quite right. It's just like he's done being a child, he's done being pushed around by this creature, and he actually fights back against
Yeah,
it
he's
for
like
the first
ripping the
time.
stuffing out of it and
Yeah.
stuff, and it's like saying, "You're not real." Like, yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, his
Yeah.
mom's just kind of screaming and somehow tripping and falling into a pool. I do not
Right.
remember how she got into the pool, and I was like, "You idiot."
Yeah. That I mean, that was a perfect example of like people in this movie behave like complete idiots, because the idea that she would run outside in that moment makes no sense. Like there's no justification for that within the movie.
Yeah.
And then she falls in the pool. But then like while she's doing that, the boy is, you know, finally really for the first time taking an active role in fighting
Yeah.
and saving his sister, which I thought was cool, and like it kind of got to me more than anything else in the movie actually.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder if there's commentary about parenting and connecting everything we've been talking about with, the commentary on America in general, because in some ways we get to see them as very good parents. Like I really did like the scene when Craig T. Nelson like sits his son down and explains how the thunderstorms work and the
Mhm.
counting, and I think that's a cool scene in general because it gets to come back later in a scary way. But that's like just good, like that's good parenting, trying to help your kid and calm your kid down. And but then there's so many other instances of like, I would not do that. Like the end of the movie, I don't care if the psychic lady has said this house is clear.
Uh-huh.
I would not let my children stay alone in that room again
Yeah.
until I had officially moved out of the house. I would not do that.
Yeah, yeah, you don't understand anything about the nature of this.
Yeah.
You're getting out of here. I always wondered, honestly, that this is a thing that I remember bothering me for like my whole life, I guess. So, so let's talk about it. Like,
Sure.
I've always thought it was interesting that the psychic lady really is portrayed as knowing what she's talking about.
Yeah, she comes in and is basically the exposition
Yeah,
fairy in this movie. Like she it is like I'll let you finish in a sec, but it is like she enters this movie like a whirlwind. And she's great. It's a what's her name? Zelda something. I totally forgot. Zelda Rubinstein, and
okay,
she's such a presence. She has such a distinct voice and look to her. She just kind of enters the movie and takes the movie over from the second she walks on the set. She's like takes the movie over, and yeah, like everything she's saying, the movie treats as just absolute solid fact
right.
that this is she's right about all of this, and the movie for until a very specific point proves her right,
Yeah.
basically.
Exactly. It goes out of its way to have that moment where she like proves that she's clairvoyant, and her advice actually successfully gets the girl out. Like
Hmm.
they never would have figured that out if not for her.
Yeah,
And then all of that happens, and then and then the final beat is she says this house is clean and then leaves, and you're like, oh good. And then it's like not only is it not clean, but like now is like the big explosion
yeah,
of supernatural. And I mean, I think now as an adult, I look at that and I'm just like, well, that's just fundamentally just tension management. Like you let us off the hook, and then you hit us while our guard was down, and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
really all that is. I think as a kid, I was like, well, how did she make that mistake? And I don't think there's really an answer to that. I wonder if there is an answer to that. Like maybe this is another example of someone, you know, acting like they know everything, but they don't know everything. Just like Craig T. Nelson tried to calm his son by saying, like, don't worry, you can tell that the storm is going away by counting. It's like, but you
Yeah.
can also tell that the storm is approaching by counting. You didn't mention that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think you're onto something there because it's played as a very funny joke in the movie, but when she's about to wrap the cord around her and go in the closet, Like there's the moment of no, I should do it. She won't come to you, but you've never done this before. And her response is, neither of you. And she's like, you're right. Go ahead. So yeah, I mean, she is kind of just, she's right to a certain extent, but she is kind of just making this up as she's going. Like she's never done something like this before. And it happens to work in a couple certain instances, but yeah, she pulled a George W. Mission accomplished, and was just not right. So yeah, I mean, which is really interesting, because like the one thing we see is, you know, we're kind of told by her that, you know, there's all these spirits in this house, and they're attracted to Carol Ann and her life force for whatever reason, and it is distracting to them and preventing them from passing on. And then we have the beast as well, which is, you know, using that and kind of controlling her to keep these spirits here for whatever reason. Doesn't matter, because it's evil. And so what they do at the end of the movie is tell Carol Ann to go towards the light, but not too towards the light, which is, for a 5-year-old child, that's got to be just very confusing. Go towards the light. Mommy's in the light. Oh, but no, wait, hold on. No, don't go towards the light. Just kidding. But they get close enough to the light, I guess, to where the spirits that have been following Carol Ann around are able to pass on. And that is, I think, what this house is meant to, or clean, whatever, is meant to facilitate. But like the beast, like there's no indication that the beast went towards the light.
I think that's what I think you're right. I think this is the answer to my childhood question, is that they didn't get rid of the television. They didn't get rid of the beast. The beast is still in the house. And which makes it even better that the first thing they do in the hotel room is they throw the TV out, because that's the beast. And that's the long and short of it. You're totally right. They got rid of the spirits, but then I admit I'm confused about, like, what does this have to do with the bodies being buried exactly? I don't know that I'm clever enough to put this together on the fly.
Yeah, I mean, besides the overarching thematic stuff we already talked about, right? With like, this is about surface level. This is, you know, we're not going to fix the deeper problem. We're just going to remove the surface problem, and boom, done. And also just this kind of suburbanization of America. Like, I think there's the one guy who says, I can't tell any of these houses apart. And Craig T. Nelson is like, yeah, but I'll tell you, they have tons of customization options. Like, my neighbor has a jacuzzi inside his house, his living room, and he's just lying, I think.
I got the impression that he was lying, because, well, the thing he describes is like, no one would do that.
No.
Like, it's such a ridiculous thing to do. And he's like, yeah, but you know, it's the construction quality is really good. It's I for some reason I love the beat that it's like, you know, you're responsible for selling like 45% of the houses in this in this area, and it's like, oh wow, like we're basically, this is a real comment about like selling, like how much of our culture is like selling, and like, what are you selling? Well, you don't really know exactly, but you know, it puts money puts food on the table, puts steaks in the fridge. In the fridge.
And the one other house we get to see when he's touring them around the house, and we're in the kitchen, and it's the same kitchen as the kitchen at their house. Like, it's the exact same model house. Like, it's just identical. But yeah, I mean, as far as your question of like, I mean, I guess the bodies are there, which is why the spirits are there. And like, you know, I mean, like the old, like, you've disturbed their graves, and therefore the spirits are restless. And therefore, you know, I don't know, man. It's a good metaphor.
I mean, I think I'm trying to see them as one metaphor, and maybe they are just two metaphors. Like the idea that it's like, we don't really know we don't know what we've built our house upon, metaphorically and literally. We have built our house upon the dead. We have been we have been incautious and disrespectful in the pursuit of cheap amenities, and then we have distracted ourselves with television, and and we're not paying attention to our children, and therefore our children get kidnapped and or they're off having underage sex in hotel rooms, perpetuating the cycle of this exact thing happening again. I mean, that we didn't say it outright, but like that's the symmetry, right? Is like,
Yeah.
she got knocked up when she was 16. Their daughter's right on track to get knocked up when she's 16. It's a self-perpetuating cycle. Like that's America is it reproduces itself with each generation.
It is very interesting, and I noted this and didn't know what to do with it, and I think you've unlocked it for me. The movie treats the teenage daughter very interestingly in that it basically ignores her. She's not around for most of the stuff, and if she is, she's just kind of off in the corner screaming. And so, like, yeah, it's this interest, like that feels like an intentional story choice to me. That like we're gonna define this family with this 16-year-old daughter in it, but she's so not present in the film, because and they don't ever seem to really know where she is. I love the end of the movie is like at the very end she just shows up. She was at a date, I guess, and then just like sees the house and screams, and they're like, "Get in the car!" And that's like her contribution to the climax. Just as a note, I looked this up while we were talking. Apparently, in the novelization, it is revealed that the daughter is his daughter from a first marriage and is not the child of Diane.
I feel like there's nothing in the movie to suggest that, so I'm just going to not treat that as canonical.
So the only clue in the actual movie itself is Steve says "my daughter Dana" and not "our daughter Dana," which is, I mean, that's not necessarily anything. I say "my son" all the time. It's definitely also my wife's son.
Yeah, it's possible.
This is the fun of doing this is that that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because this is our interpretation, and I think what you're saying works and makes sense, and also the treatment of the 16-year-old makes a lot of sense under this kind of view.
Yeah, I think so. I'm fine saying that this is my interpretation. There you go. Bam.
Yeah.
It's
did you know that the skeletons in the pool were real human skeletons?
No. What?
The crew decided it would be too expensive to get fake ones? Where does one go to get real ones?
Is this like that vampire movie where they decided to go find a real vampire? Because I feel like having real dead bodies in your Hollywood movie about how we exploit, and disrespect the dead is a little on the nose.
This is just from IMDb trivia, so please take it with a grain of salt. But that's what it says here. It also says that Jo Beth Williams, the actress who played the mother, wasn't told that they were real skeletons until after they finished shooting the scene.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay.
I guess one of the things we definitely need to talk about before we finish this is the Steven Spielberg of this whole thing, right? We said at the beginning that he was one of the writers of the movie. He was a producer of the movie, and there is a long-standing kind of incredibly famous rumor about this film that began almost as soon as the film was released, that Steven Spielberg was actually the director of this movie and Tobe Hooper did not do anything, that he was just a figurehead. And when you go back and try to read and connect the dots and see how this all got started and where it went and where it's gone since then, and like the origin of this is basically Spielberg was under contract to make E.T., and part of that contract at the time was that he was not allowed to be directing any other film while he was working on E.T. Now, E.T. and Poltergeist came out basically within a month of each other. And so I guess the belief is that because he was not legally and officially allowed to direct, he installed a figurehead in Tobe Hooper, but in essence directed the film. Everything I've read about this says that this is probably not entirely true. Like there's weirdness with this, Matt, because like if you look at interviews with a lot of the cast, almost all of the cast is like, no, Tobe Hooper was the one saying action, he was the one saying cut, he was the one we were talking to, he was working with us. However, Steven Spielberg was on set basically every day of the shoot. And Steven Spielberg is Steven Spielberg, and Tobe Hooper was younger than Spielberg, less well known than Spielberg at the time of this movie. And so like, if you're directing, but then Steven Spielberg says, okay, but what if we do it this way? That's the way you're going to do it.
Yeah.
I think the one cast member who kind of, I guess, according to the rest of them, threw Tobe Hooper under the bus a little bit was Zelda Rubinstein, who said that she was directed by Steven Spielberg the entire time she was there. Now, her portion of the movie was 6 days, right? She was only on set and part of the shoot for a very limited time compared to everyone else. But yeah, she was like, nah, I wasn't directed by Tobe Hooper. I was directed by Steven Spielberg. So whatever. It's all confusing. We're never truly going to know the full answer to this thing. I will tell you, this certainly does feel like a Spielberg movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
The look of it, the tone of it, the feel of it, it feels very much like Spielberg. That does not mean Tobe Hooper did not direct it. I think he did. I think he directed a majority of the shots, but like I said, he had Spielberg there. Spielberg was offering advice, was maybe saying, "Oh, we could do this shot like this. I think that would look good." And when you have someone like Spielberg, giving that stuff to you, you're gonna take it.
Yeah. I mean, there are particular shots where we have the sort of classic standard Spielberg camera movement is where it's either moving in or it's moving sideways, and there were a few of those shots where I was like, this is just like that one shot from Jurassic Park or whatever, and it's just very very clear. And in fact, there was a moment to be honest, I entirely forgot all of this, and I was like, oh, we haven't done a Spielberg movie in a while, and I was watching it and I was like, this simultaneously does and doesn't feel like a Spielberg movie. And then I checked. I checked and it said, directed by Tobe Hooper and written by Steven Spielberg. And then I was immediately messaged you and was like, is this one of those cases where it was like secretly actually directed by Spielberg? And it makes total sense because it has his fingerprints on it. Yes. Yeah. Evidently, but it also doesn't quite feel like just, oh, Spielberg made this movie. It has its own. It has its own. It's like a half and half almost. But I mean, like you said, I mean, if you got an artist like Spielberg making suggestions, then and you have final say, then it's like, well, yeah, it's your choice. It was Spielberg's suggestion. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. It doesn't really bother me, honestly. And I get that people are very precious about credits in filmmaking, but to me, it's like, look, the reality is they both had artistic control to some degree, and that's whatever. It's fine. Good.
Yeah, I mean, supposedly Spielberg sent Tobe Hooper a note after the premiere that was basically like, "Hey, man, I'm sorry, I don't know how this rumor got started. I think you did great work. I think we both worked very hard on this movie, and we're both very proud of it. And so, like, I don't think like." I don't think right now, if you ask Spielberg, he'd be like, yeah, I totally directed that movie. Like, I think, they were both part of it. Like the whole process is collaborative, right? Like, it's like, we love to be auteur with our directors, right? And say like, this is the single-minded vision of Tobe Hooper. But of course it isn't. No, it's hundreds of people. And if one of those people is your producer named Steven Spielberg, he's going to leave a large fingerprint on the movie. I think that can be true. The only thing that annoys me about this is the people that want to completely remove Tobe Hooper from the equation and just be like, he was just a figurehead. He's just the name that was put down on the paper. He didn't have anything to do with this movie. And that clearly is not true by all accounts by what people have said on set and things like that. That's just not true.
Yeah, it doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm. You don't know the weirdest shot in the film for me? I
What?
wish I could thoroughly explain this, but I don't think I'm going to do a very good job of it. When they're rushing to get out of the house and Craig T. Nelson is frantically trying to find his keys, there's this really weird thing that I'm going to say Toby Hooper does where
Uh-huh.
he like decides to pause the camera on a close up of Craig T. Nelson's butt as he's like trying to feel his pockets for keys in a way that just like felt very purposeful and deliberate. And I didn't understand why. Like, it's not going to work to me explaining it. You're going to have to watch it. But just like what the camera does in the moment when it's like looking at Kim search his pockets for keys, like feels like we're like really emphasizing his ass for some
Uh-huh.
reason. And I was just like, this is weird. Why are we doing this way?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't actually recall that exact shot, but I do wonder. I mean, I think you picked Craig T. Nelson for a role like this, sort of to have a schlubby guy to make fun of.
Yeah, yeah.
Like he's not an ugly man. He's not Homer Simpson, but neither is he like attractive Hollywood actor man, right?
Yeah.
He's he's a guy. He's a guy, and then like half the movie, he's like sweating and has dark circles under his eyes and looks
Yeah,
on the
he looks
verge
like
of
shit.
death.
Yeah.
He looks like
Well, and
absolute shit.
yeah, I mean, when you cast Craig T. Nelson, you cast someone who can do the scene when he's high, joking around with his wife, looking in a
Uh-huh.
mirror, and like pushing his belly out and then suck it in, and pushing his belly out and suck it in, and do
Right.
it like, yeah, he's the type of actor that can pull off that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think using him comedically and having a nice close up of his ass is part and parcel. I think
It's
that
just
makes
like in a very
makes sense.
tense moment of the film, and I just don't understand why it's like the camera feels like you, the audience, need to be extremely concerned about exactly which pocket the keys are in. Not that he's like searching for the keys frantically, but you need to know which pocket they're in. And it's like, I don't need to know that. I just have him look for the keys and then find it. I don't know. It's just very, very strange.
Yeah. I don't remember, so I can't comment.
I'm a weirdo. I don't know why these things stand out to me.
Well, I mean, it probably stood out because that's just not a decision that was sort of the decision that made sense. Like you would cut around that, or you would shorten that, or something. I mean, I think that's the one major change in me, over time, is like looking for purpose in everything. And the thing that surprised me, as we've done this project over time, is realizing like, oh, if you look for purpose in everything, you'll usually find it, actually.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Whereas like young kid Matt wasn't even paying attention to the fact that he's reading a book about Ronald Reagan, because it's like, yeah, whatever. There was a book on the bookshelf and he picked it up and he's reading it. And it's like, no, they chose for him to be reading a book about Ronald Reagan. Why is it a book about Ronald Reagan? and then you can figure something out. So, but then you see something that's like, why are we getting a close up of his ass? And you're like, I don't know. And that bothers you, understandably.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like these like the thing that is so difficult to understand about movies sometime is that every frame, every prop, every angle, every light choice is the result of specific decisions. Like most people are not just winging this shit, right? That's not how almost anybody makes a movie. Is just like they don't just show up on set and be like, I don't know, let's put the camera there and let's throw some lights there. It's like they think about these things, they build them. And so yeah, like I think movies, maybe more than anything, are this great example of every choice has purpose and will have a reason behind it. And that's fun. That's really fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Speaking of but speaking of like moments that I really loved director wise, is when Craig T. Nelson and his boss are climbing up to the top of the hill to show him phase 5, and we're we're like brought up this hill to this beautiful vista, and we're next to this white picket fence. I mean, like just vintage classic Americana. And it's not until the very end of that scene that we cut to show what's on the other side of the fence, which is a giant fucking cemetery, like a huge cemetery, like the biggest cemetery that's ever existed on the planet.
Yeah, like dense with these looming gravestones, and I mean, it's like shocking to the degree of being a comedy shot, because you're juxtaposing this beautiful Americana with this like over the top horror movie, like not just horror movie, like haunted house level cemetery. And it's a slap in the face, and it works really well.
You got any nitpicks about this movie? Any nitpicks?
I mean, I don't know, like I said a minute ago, part of me was like, is this a good movie? Like genuinely, I was like, this is like, and then, but like, I think that the answer that I came to was just like realizing that it was like a satire, and that it was a comedy, and that I wasn't supposed to be thinking on the level of like, why did she run outside? That's dumb. It's like, everything everyone does in the movie is dumb. It's saying something about like Americans and American society. And I mean, what, like, if it's not intended as a satire, well, that's a problem. But I'm pretty sure it is. So nitpick wise, I mean, it's a little slow, but I guess that's a nitpick. I think it's a little slow paced.
The structure of the movie is really weird. You know, we talked about how the Carol Ann thing happened so early. It really, and this might just be an 80s thing, right? This is like, we don't tell stories like this anymore. But it does feel a little strange sometimes when you like look at the movie from like a 1,000 foot level of like how the beats lead from one to another. It's different.
Yeah, we had a different sense of what kind of pacing was permitted back then, I think.
Yeah.
I want to share that the other, you told the story, you were talking about the beer cans, and the other day I was pushing my grocery cart out of the supermarket, and I had a case of cans on the bottom of my cart, and like in the course of pushing them, they like the vibration caused the case to like fall off the front edge of the cart, which I then immediately proceeded to like run over with the cart because I was pushing the cart. So it just like shredded the entire case of cans open while crushing them into the concrete and puncturing them and causing them to roll in all directions in the middle of like the road, while spinning and spewing streamers of carbonated beverage, just like in this movie. So that's I just wanted to share that story.
And I'm sure you just like picked them up and just got in your car and just carried on with your day.
Yeah, I just put them right in the car with them spraying everywhere, just like that. Yep.
That sucks, man. That's an unfortunate thing. We knocked over a jar of baby food on the floor of a Target, and it was just like, help.
I mean, luckily I was outside, so my honest immediate reaction was just to burst out laughing at my own hapless maladroitness. It was funny. Yeah, I mean, the idea of running into someone's house with beer spraying everywhere is just absolutely insane. But like, that's the perfect scene to illustrate that this is a satire. Because it's like there's men yelling at football on the TV while drinking beer out of cans that are spraying in all directions all over the carpeted living room. It's
America.
Perfect. It's genius.
America. What did you think of the special effects in this movie? I think one thing that I didn't remember quite as much as I thought I did is how much we see the ghosts. Like the giant skull coming out of the door, the hands reaching out. I didn't remember that part as much. I thought it was mostly just invisible stuff moving, and then the skeletons and the tree and the clown. I didn't think there was as much actual tangible, like poltergeist, I guess. What do you think of them?
Totally agree. I one shot I did not remember at all was like when the mom is trying to get into the room, and the sort of like it's like a spider skull dragon creature is like
It looks
standing
like
in
a
front of it.
it looks
Yeah,
like a Ghostbusters ghost,
it
essentially.
does. It does look like Ghostbusters,
Probably the
but
same technology, actually. Yeah.
it looks quite good though.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain things where um, it's I guess I forget the right word for these things, but like um, yeah, sorry, I'm just blanking on the word. I used to know the word for this, but like you can see the edges of sort of the the picture that was
Yeah.
interposed into the frame.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
But like whatever, it doesn't bother me. I was actually im- not impressed in an absolute sense, but impressed in a relative sense of like, whoa, this looks better than than I remembered it looking, actually, or than I would have expected, I should say.
I
um,
agree. I like that technology. We talked about Ghostbusters, and yeah, I think it's essentially the same technology that's being used here. Like it ages very well, surprisingly. Like I think
yeah.
that all works. And there's like the I'll always love the practical effects of any kind of gore stuff, like him ripping his face apart. There is, of course, always that cut that you can't help but see when it clearly changes from being a human head to a doll
Yeah,
head that's gonna rip the same thing happens in Terminator, right? Like
yeah,
when it switches from him, being Arnold Schwarzenegger to clearly a dummy Arnold Schwarzenegger head and an arm. Like you could always see that cut, but I never really mind. Like I can see it,
right.
I clock it, and then I just move on with the coolness of the scene.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing about Terminator to me is that I still, to this day, prefer the look of T2 Arnie with his face shredded off to any modern version of that
Yeah.
same thing
Yeah.
where you use CGI to remove his face.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like on some level more correct to do it that way because like the
Yeah.
eye is like physically in the right place. But the old way just looks better to me. And there's something ineffable about having the thing actually be in the shot and be receiving the light from the light sources and everything.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. It's
and
better.
I think one reason why the technology works really well for both this movie and Ghostbusters is that these things are supposed to look ethereal and otherworldly, and
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
we're more than willing to allow them to be a little bit off because it's like, well, they're ghosts. Of course they don't look quite right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever see any of the sequels? They made so many of these.
I don't think so. No. Did you?
We a long time ago did on for Phantom Zone, way back in the day. Adrian and I did Poltergeist 3, which was, I believe, the last film Heather O'Rourke was in. She played this Carol Ann character 3 times for both the 3 Poltergeists, and it was really bad.
Uh-huh.
It was a really bad movie. I mean, like you said, this movie wasn't. I don't. That was just a good movie. This is a good movie, but yeah, the sequels, no.
Yeah. This is a good movie. I mean, it's almost like this is a B movie that's elevated by the stuff it's doing with the themes
Mm-hmm.
and the direction. It's not a great movie, but it's not a bad movie. I think
Yeah.
it's a good movie. And I'm glad we watched it because I really haven't watched it since I was a literal child.
Yeah.
And I feel like this conversation kind of showed me some stuff that was bugging me. It was like at the edge of my awareness, and I was like, "We're doing something. What are we doing exactly?" So I'm glad we talked about it.
I agree. They made a reboot to this in 2015, and I definitely saw it. And I am looking through pictures of it right now,
Uh-huh.
and I have zero memory of this movie. Just Sam Rockwell was the star. I don't remember this movie at all.
Oh my god, that's fascinating.
That's wild, right? Like, wow. I definitely have seen the 2015 version of this film more recently than I have seen the original, and yet I cannot remember a damn thing. So that tells you the overall quality of that remake.
Okay, fascinating.
All right, Matt. So, moment of truth. How are you going to vote? Yes? No? What do you think?
Oh, interesting. Forgot about this part. Man, I haven't been thinking about this question at all until this very moment. I mean, it's definitely not one of my favorite movies, and I don't know that it's one of the movies that just like everybody needs to see, which is my
Mhm.
usual qualification for a Doof Cannon movie. I mean, I
Sure.
kind of feel bad because I think we had a good conversation, and I think it's
Mhm.
an enjoyable enough movie. Um, I mean, I may be underselling it, but I think I'm going to go no,
Okay.
not because it's bad, just because it's like it doesn't cross that ineffable threshold in my mind.
Sure.
What
Yeah,
do you
no, that's
think?
fair. That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at our list right now just to kind of see the comparisons here, like what other horror films are on our list right now. We have not too many. I guess Coraline, if you want to call that horror. Eh,
It's
eh.
it's got some moments.
Yeah. The Thing is on here,
Yeah.
and Nope is on here, which
Okay.
again, uh, I think I like both of those movies more than this.
Yeah.
Which doesn't necessarily mean this doesn't deserve to be on here. I think I'm going to go yes. I think this is a really enjoyable, really good movie that I think is trying to do that very fun 80s thing where we're trying to do this kind of campy fun movie while also having some stuff to say. And I like
Yeah.
it for that. So yeah, I'm going to
Sure.
say yes. So we're
Yeah.
split on this one. Doesn't happen too often.
Doesn't happen too often. I mean, it was written by Spielberg, so it's like
Mhm.
it's there's something there. There's some meat to it. It can be
Yeah.
defended. I think it's okay for us to be split though. That's
Yeah, I agree. But that final decision is up to you. Are you folks going to be split on it? What do you think? As we said, there is a link in the show notes of this episode that will send you over to our Patreon account where you can vote yes or no for Poltergeist. You do not have to be a patron to vote in that poll. That it will be a public open poll. So if you're not a patron, you can still go there and vote. Let us know, please. And after you vote, leave a comment if you can that says why you voted the way you voted. Really curious what people think about this. I think this is probably going to do pretty well in the vote, is my guess here. I think this is a well liked film
yeah.
that I think a lot of people are going to have good things to say about.
Would not bother me if it won.
Mm-hmm. All right. I did want to talk to you briefly about the canon, though, Matt. We took a break for this for a while, and part of the reason we took a break is because I was kind of trying to sit back and think about what we want this to be. We've been running this for quite a while now, and our council, the numbers of people that are on that council that has the ability to do this varies over time. People are no longer able to support. New people come, people leave. It happens, and the amount of responses we get to our request for nominations fluctuates. Sometimes fluctuating downwards at times, I think. So I'm always kind of thinking about if there's an opportunity to retool this. One of the ideas I came up with is that if Poltergeist is voted into the canon, it will be our 31st film on our list. And so something I was thinking about would be, what if we get to 50 and then we say it's full,
Uh-huh.
and then every film we do after that, not only do you have to nominate the movie, but then you have to nominate what movie you would like to replace it with.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a fun. That might be over gamifying it, maybe. But I'm just kind of thinking of a way to spice things up a little bit.
I like the idea of it. I think we can hammer out the implementation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it'll be too complicated.
Yeah.
But I like it. I like the idea of there only being 50, because it's like, if it's your list of the best things ever and there's like 400 of them, then it's kind of like, well, okay, are we really, how where is your standards at exactly?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, I mean, it'll be quite a while before we hit 50. But I think for now, we're just going to kind of carry on with the way we've been doing it. We've got tons of nominations from months past. So we'll keep asking for new nominations, but we'll also be pulling from old nominations to kind of round out our 5 per month for our vote. And then we'll just go from there.
Sounds good.
All right. So that is the canon. Please vote and let us know what you think.
Doof.
Okay, Matt, before we go, I did want to spend some time here. We finished our Oscars series, and we are once again on the lookout for a new ongoing series to do on the show. If you happen to be someone listening to this for the first time today, we typically on the Doofcast like to have our main theme of the show be an ongoing series discussing it. And so we've got to figure out what we want to do here, Matt. I'm really interested in coming up with something else, I thought it would be fun to return to our roots and do another director. It's been a little bit of time since we've done a director. What do you think?
I agree, and those are often my favorite bits that we do.
Yeah.
Not that 100% of our Deconstructing Directors series have been my favorite things ever, but I think you've got to take that risk when you dig into a director, and
Yeah.
we really get to go on a very deep dive in a way that I always find really like intellectually fulfilling,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like I learn something every time we do this, and it has been a while. So yeah, let's do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think the reason for that break was the last director we did was Ridley Scott, a man who has directed 26 or 27 films now because Napoleon is out. We covered 26 films, and so we were doing Ridley Scott for almost a year, and I think we were kind of Ridley'd out by the end of that series, especially since Ridley Scott is the type of director whose films vary in quality. He has some of my favorite films ever and some real stinkers. So I think what we want to do here, I want to set some stipulations for us. So I did reach out to our patrons and just kind of ask what directors you would like to see us cover next, and we got a lot of great suggestions. The struggle I have with some of them is the number of movies, right?
Right.
So, like, I would love to do a series on Steven Spielberg. Absolutely love to do that. Steven Spielberg has directed 36 films. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way we could do that.
Yeah.
And if we start doing the thing, like one potential solution to that is like, okay, we'll just pick 10 of them. And it's like, it comes down to, okay, A, how do I pick? How do I do that? And B, some of the most fun of the series is the lesser known films that end up, teaching you so much about the director that you wouldn't have expected. Like I think the most famous example for us, I think, is Bound with the Wachowskis, which is like, if you asked me to pick a list of Wachowski films that I wanted to do a podcast on, I didn't know anything about Bound, and I wouldn't have picked Bound. But Bound was incredible and such a perfect kind of window into who they are as creators that like losing that, just I can't imagine.
Yeah. I mean, even some of the, like, what we could lovingly call some of Ridley Scott's intermediate stinkers are like interesting attempts.
Yeah.
And you learn something about him as a filmmaker, even if you didn't necessarily think it was a great movie.
Yeah. Like A Good Year. Remember A Good Year, the winery one?
Yeah.
Never would have picked that. If you told me to pick 10 Ridley Scott films, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to solve the Spielberg problem. But we had suggestions for the Coens. We had suggestions for Brian De Palma, and same problem, right? Brian De Palma has directed a lot of movies, and while I would love to do a De Palma series, it's probably not achievable under the current show format. So that's kind of where we are. So I've got my list open here, and I just wanted to run some names by you and kind of get your feeling on them.
Sure.
So the first is one we've talked about before, but is Darren Aronofsky, who I think we've done one Aronofsky film on the show. We did Pi a long time ago, a movie that I think you really like.
Yeah.
But he's directed 8 films, so it would be an 8-film series. The most recent film is The Whale, the one that won Brendan Fraser a Best Actor Academy Award last year. Haven't seen that. I've seen most of the rest of these, but that's always a potential option. I think he's a very interesting filmmaker, very visual. Lots to talk about visually there, for sure.
I love Aronofsky's movies. You're not going to hear any real argument from me on Aronofsky, and especially since I've only seen roughly half of these, and the other half they're on my list. They're perpetually on my list of, oh yeah, I should see that, and then I forget about it immediately. So, sorry to spoil it, but I'm actually personally leaning pretty heavily in favor of Aronofsky, honestly.
Okay.
Right out the gate.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So I'll kind of quickly go through some other ones. Then I've thought long and hard about Denis Villeneuve, who is a director we both really love, and my hesitation with Villeneuve is we've done, I think, 3 episodes on Arrival already. We've done a Blade Runner 2049 episode. We've done episodes on both Dune and Dune Part 2. And like, I don't think it is necessarily true that just because we've covered these movies on the show before, we can never do a director series on them, because I think we always have a little bit of a different focus, a little bit of a different goal when we're doing it for the director series. But when it's like half the movies, I start to go, oh, I don't know. That's the same thing with Bong Joon-ho, by the way, because we've done a Snowpiercer episode, an Okja episode, and a Parasite episode. So
yeah, and another factor. This is a minor factor, but like if I've already seen almost all the director's movies, then it's like, well, what am I really getting out of this?
yeah, that's
Right?
fair.
Like it's
Yeah.
fun to talk about them, obviously, but like to Aronofsky, I haven't seen half of his movies. Like that's already sounds appealing to me. For example, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. Same thing with Ryan Johnson, by the way, who's been on our list, and he only has 6 films so far, which I think our general cutoff is 5. We want someone that has more than 5 or more. But we've here's the hesitation with Ryan Johnson I have, Matt. I don't want to talk about The Last Jedi anymore. I'm sick of every time I talk about The Last Jedi, people yelling at me about The Last Jedi, and I'm just so tired of it. I'm just so tired of it.
The other thing is, I feel like we've talked about most of his movies, even if we might not actually have done so. I feel like we have.
Here's the thing, like the reason I want to do Ryan Johnson is because I've never seen Brick, and I really want to see Brick, and so maybe the solution to this is just do an episode on Brick someday, and that like problem solved.
Yeah, we can do whatever we want. It's important to remember that.
Yeah. My other option was Noah Baumbach, who I bring up only because he's married to Greta Gerwig, and they wrote Barbie together, so he's a pretty big deal right now. And he's got a lot of movies, some of which I've seen and I really like, some of which I haven't seen and I'd like to visit. What's your thought on that?
Well, I mean, honestly, I have seen literally 0 of these movies.
So you don't even know enough to know if it's a good idea or not.
Exactly. So if we did go with it, I would be going purely on your say so. And then if I don't like it, then
it's gonna be a long 11 episodes. Yeah.
And it'll all be your fault. So
true. I don't know if I can handle that kind of pressure.
Yeah.
I was also thinking about Kubrick, who I think we might have a similar problem with some other stuff. He's done 13 movies, so it would be a little bit of a longer series. But we've done an episode on Barry Lyndon. We've done an episode on The Shining. We've done many episodes on The Shining. We've done Dr. Strangelove. Have we done A Clockwork Orange? I know we read the novel.
I don't think we did the movie. No.
Yeah, I don't think we've done an episode on the movie. But I feel like Kubrick's always a good standby, though.
I Kubrick would be on the near the top of my list as well. It kind of hits all of our qualities of like, I've seen several of his movies, but not all of them. You already know it would be great to talk about. Like, it's not like we're gonna hit just a streak of stinkers with Kubrick. Like that's not gonna happen.
What do you think of Paul Thomas Anderson?
I like Paul Thomas Anderson. I really was blown away by by There Will Be Blood and The Master. Those movies just really worked for me. And then I out of this list, I've seen Boogie Nights. I thought that was good. I've seen Punch Drunk Love. I thought that was very interesting. I haven't seen the rest of these, so yeah, I think he'd be up there too. I guess based on this conversation, I kind of have a top 3 for me, which would be Aronofsky, Paul Thomas Anderson, and Kubrick. Where are you sitting?
Yeah, I mean, all these ones that I've referred to you have been ones that I want to do, because why would I have written them down if I didn't want to do them in some way? So, do you have, I guess, one of the 3 that you maybe, is it still kind of Aronofsky is the top of your list here?
I think so.
I think we've had a lot of luck doing Deconstructing Director series on directors whose last name ends in ski.
Uh-huh.
So
So that seals it.
Yeah, I think it does. No, I like, so Darren Aronofsky, for those that don't know, has directed 8 films: Pi, Requiem for a Dream, The Fountain, The Wrestler, Black Swan, Noah, Mother, and The Whale. Matt, there's an exclamation point there.
I know. It's important. Yeah.
So those are 8 films. I think I've actually seen all of these except for The Whale. Which isn't a deal breaker for me. I don't mind revisiting these movies with you. So that's not a big deal for me. But yeah, I like this. I think it is an appropriate length without being a 26 movie commitment like Ridley Scott was. So even if we're not enjoying ourselves, it will be over pretty quick, relatively. And I think we can put things like Paul Thomas Anderson and Stanley Kubrick in the maybe pile for covering later.
Sure. Because we could do Aronofsky, Paul Thomas Anderson, and Kubrick in the same amount of time that it took to do Ridley Scott.
Oh my God, that's actually true. So yeah, let's just do it. Let's start with Darren Aronofsky. Really interesting director. I like him quite a bit. And I'm looking forward to revisiting some of these movies, especially Pi. Like we did. It was a long time ago we did that episode on Pi. I think it was one of our first ones when we switched to the Doofcast format, and that's years ago now. And so I'm curious, both how it will reflect how we've changed over these years, but also just like how the Deconstructing series has us look at these movies differently.
I agree. I look forward to see how we've sharpened our tools in 250 something episodes.
I also cannot wait to hear what you have to say about Mother.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one, so that's one of the reasons I'm glad to talk about this.
Yeah. So I guess that seals it then. We are going to begin our Deconstructing Director series with the director Darren Aronofsky. It will be a 8-film series, and it will begin next week. How about that?
Awesome.
We're going to start it right away. We're gonna watch Pi again and talk about it. Oh, I love that movie. That's gonna be fun.
Me too.
I'm excited, Matt. This is good.
Yeah, it's always fun to start a new project.
Yeah, I agree. But that is all we have for you folks this week. If you have any opinions on Darren Aronofsky or on Poltergeist, and I hope you have some opinions because we want to hear them, because we want you to vote, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on X at doofmedia, and our subreddit is r/doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not subscribed to the Doofcast, please do so. You can find us on iTunes, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
You can find this and all of our shows over at doofmedia.com. And if you want to support us, please consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head to patreon.com/doofmedia. You're going to be there anyway while you're voting on this poll. So you can head on over there and subscribe to us. You get a whole bunch of bonus episodes, cool stuff. And if you hit a high enough level, you get to be a member of the council that is deciding these movies for us. We need fresh blood on the council. We need new people. New people, new perspectives, new ideas, new movies. So head on over there, join the council, join up.
Yeah, the current council is drained. We've drained them of every drop of their blood.
That's true.
And I'm not sorry. That's what they signed up for. They knew what they were signing up for.
Should we let them outside?
I mean, sure, fine.
All right, you all can go outside. We'll bring some new council members in. You can take a break.
And go ahead and give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts on your way out. Thanks. Bye.
All right, folks, that's it. Next week, Deconstructing Aronofsky begins with Pi. Not the food. The number.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.